Here in Jackson County, Oregon, we actually have more COVID cases than Multnomah County. Multnomah County is where Portland resides, and we, for all intents and purposes, are a rural county. We now see the Delta variant of COVID being the predominant variant, as was predicted by epidemiologists here in the United States of America. And my wife and I now are in day 5 of COVID isolation, despite us both being vaccinated very early on. And of course, we've been infected with the Delta variant. And now we've found through research, mostly that done in China, and that the viral load of the Delta variant is 1,000 times higher than the Alpha variant. The Alpha variant was the UK variant, and the UK variant was much more contagious than the native variant. And still we have people who won't be vaccinated. So you have to ask yourself, why is that? Well, a recent AP poll, I think it was taken earlier this week, I'll share it in the notes, shows that by far the majority of people who are not vaccinated don't plan on being vaccinated, and that's a change. It used to be that some people wanted to wait, give the vaccination some more time. Some thought they might be able to be talked into it, and some were, if it was a primary care provider, a PA, an NP, a physician who spoke to them about it, or a close friend who had some knowledge. But that doesn't seem to be the case any longer. Also, what it showed is something we already knew, that the most predictable group who will not vaccinate are white, straight, cisgender Christian men. Why is that? If you take freedom, which holds a very elevated spot in the ethos of Americans, and you look at it a little bit more closer, it has been sacralized now. And now I would say it's gone beyond sacralization, and now it's been deified. It is now a God, and it is a God that stands above the traditional Christian Trinity. So freedom now stands above Jesus, stands above God the Father, and stands above the Holy Spirit. Anytime you take any ideology to the extreme, it could be patriotism, it could be some religious thought, some spiritual thought, it could be science. People are always willing to do terrible things. People are willing to blow themselves up and kill others. People are willing to kill physicians who provide safe abortions. And you have things such as eugenics, right? That was all supposedly scientific based. And it's one of our great exports to Nazi Germany. In 1976, in June of 1976, the then president prophet of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Spencer Kimball, wrote an essay. It was entitled "The False Gods We Worship." And one thing caught my eye, and it's something I think about a lot, is that he pointed out that we train up a boy or a man to war, and we call that patriotism. And Spencer Kimball called that false patriotism, counterfeit patriotism. So if we take that thought and we applied it to freedom. Freedom is actually a false god that has somehow tricked so many Christians. And because it is their God, they are willing to not only sacrifice themselves, they're willing to sacrifice their grandparents, their older parents, adult children, sometimes children, spouses. They're all willing to sacrifice them on the sacrificial table of freedom. Now, we know that any vaccine is not 100%, but over and over again it has shown that it decreases the likelihood of admissions to the hospital, death. My wife and I aren't admitted to the hospital, and a large reason is that we were vaccinated early this year, and my first jab, I love the British call it jabs, was in December. So although we feel crappy, we're not in the ICU. Here in our little county, Jackson County, in our little town of Medford, one of the hospitals, as of yesterday morning, may have increased or decreased, but now had 55 COVID admissions. To give you a perspective, for our hospital, that would be about 2 floors of just COVID patients. I know of one ICU patient who died yesterday due to COVID. It's been reported to me that the majority of respiratory therapists won't refuse to be vaccinated. That at least one of these therapists, while having active COVID symptoms, was taking care of patients in the ICU. That one of these respiratory therapists gave COVID to one of the intensivists. And that now about 3/4 of these respiratory therapists are out due to COVID symptoms. I had a sneaking suspicion about this, as when I'm on call, sometimes I'm called into the ER to reduce a fracture, put a fracture back where it belongs, and sometimes this requires some sedation. And our respiratory therapist is always brought in for that. And I don't remember exactly the comments or what happened, but it gave me the impression that this certain respiratory therapist was an anti-vaxxer, but I blew it off because that would just be unimaginable. Someone like that in their position with their training would be like that. But I guess my intuition was right. This is just crazy. So what do we do? What do we do to convince people that worshiping freedom is a false god? I don't know. How did we manage to convince people in the US that eugenics was fake science? I don't know. I really don't know. It's a bit worrisome, for sure. But I don't know how to fight this false god that so many people are willing to die for. Remember, this false god of freedom is what led people to raid our capital and try to kill people, beat up police officers, while holding close the idea that Blue Lives Matter. Any ideology or thought can be malleable and can be bent to uphold one's own false convictions. So, the false god of freedom. Think about it. I think it carries a lot of explanatory power.